Shawn Mitchell. We've known each other a long time. I mean, we haven't talked in a long time, but I mean, we've known each other for I don't know. I feel like it's been over a decade.
St. Baldrick's, I think in 2010 or 11 is when Mason was 18 months old and he did his first St. Baldrick's.
Yeah. You know, I'm not sure how to start this because this is the first one that I'm doing with somebody right after the issues that are going on right now with the murder of George Floyd. And I just think I don't want to make this the topic, but I think it's important to address, just say it. I mean, you know, the timeline on this, when it gets put out, is during this time. And I think not mentioning that that's an atrocity, and that's something that I'm hoping cooler heads will prevail, and that I understand both sides in terms of the frustration of the African-American community and the good cops that are trying their best to do what they're supposed to be doing, and the having to relook at their profession and figure this out, figure out a solution. I have a young daughter who right now, I've never seen her so loaded for bear. She's so upset about what's going on. But anyway, and I don't know.
I 100% agree with that. I mean, obviously I'm up in Northern Nevada. You guys are down in Southern Nevada. I didn't think that I would see some of the things that happened this past weekend here in Reno. I also was surprised by, I think Sunday morning, there was over 200 volunteers that showed up to clean buildings they had nothing to do with, to clean up streets. So that right there, I think is a testament to, our community. I'm sure people are doing the same thing in Vegas. It's a tough thing right now, but again, I think addressing it, not making it necessarily our topic here today.
No.
Yeah.
Anger is definitely a valid feeling to have right now. And so it makes it really difficult to lecture, especially when we aren't part of that community in any way, shape, or form, because we don't live with that situation. But anyway, regardless, going forward, one of the things you said that you wanted to focus on is on the opportunities that all young designers have right now, is the way you said it in your email to me. And I think that's fantastic.
Yes.
So I think we should start out, first of all, from you introducing yourself, tell you a little bit about what you do, and then let's go into kind of what your thoughts are about on that topic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. My name is Shawn Mitchell. I am trained as an architect. I'm not a licensed architect. But I've been in the architecture and construction profession since I'm 16. So we're looking on 22 years at this point. With that, I've had a lot of experience across the board, residential, commercial. I've had the opportunity to train and work with a lot of great designers and creatives throughout my experience in Idaho and down in Nevada. Currently, I am the director of facilities for a cannabis company here in Nevada. I've the past 5 years basically have been designing and building with support with our team all of our facilities. So we have a dispensary in Las Vegas. We have one in Incline Village, Nevada. And then our cultivation and production facilities are up here.
Cool. So what made you, I think that you saw some of the interviews, or maybe you kind of, I don't know if you watched, because they are 45 minutes long. I know some people are like, oh, watch the first 5 minutes. And then it was like, too long. I like the long form. I like the long format on these things, because I think conversations it takes longer to express an idea.
Yeah, for sure.
5 minutes.
It takes me back to my old architecture school studio days. I had a professor by the name of Bill Bowler up in Idaho, and fortunate enough to be his teaching assistant when I got into my third year of design, teaching the second year design students, which was their first design course that, after you go through history and all the other basics, you get to a design course and everyone gets really excited. And I was a part of a teaching assistant group, and it was very much an open discussion based format. Right. And that was awesome. I really do. And I've sat in when I was in Vegas. I've taken one or maybe two of your creative courage courses that you did, at certain places of business.
Sure. Yeah.
Obviously I think this is a branch off of that, given what's happening with COVID. You have adapted and figured out how can I find the utmost value in what I'm doing and bring those people together. So that's what intrigued me from watching what you've done. I will say I did cut a couple off at 15 minutes. I didn't go the full 45, but I tried to get
Well,
through.
that's the end of our interview. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. I'm kidding. No, just to throw this in, because it just hit me, and this is what this is about, is just kind of expressing things. But even the long format, one person says something, and then you respond to the thing, and then the thing I say makes you think of something, and then you respond. Yes. And it's basically what goes on in our brains, but within a millisecond.
Yep.
Is just drawn out in a conversation, because our minds work so fast. I mean, we do a 45-minute conversation, but we have it with ourselves in a millisecond.
Yes.
And I think it's the same process, is that we're absorbing ideas and we're sharing and we're growing and we're trying to find paths together and everything. And you are creative. You've chosen that as your path in your life. Yeah. And I would love to delve into why that is, but I don't want to take up too much time. I don't know how much you want to talk about the particular topic, so I don't want to.
Yeah, no. I got into this. I think my first job was at 16. I lasted a year shagging carts and doing demo samples for Albertsons, and then I was fortunate enough to get a job at an architecture firm for someone that I actually studied martial arts with since I was 11. He just happened to be an architect here in the Reno area. And that really kicked me off to get excited about those things. I remember it started off with construction.
Sorry, it sounds like a TV show, Crime Fighting Architects. It sounds like you guys should have been a duo in a TV show. Anyway, go ahead.
We would have been good at the architecture part. I don't know if our duo together would necessarily fight crime, but we'll put a pin in that one.
Yeah, right, sounds good.
But yeah, so we started off, doing construction. My dad was a general contractor, so certain things came to me pretty easily. But that's when I really got excited about it. I remember one of the first times I really thought, hey, this could be a pathway for me. Was it snowed really bad and we couldn't get to the job site. So he said, well, why don't you come into the office? You can help me build models. And I started off building the first one, and he goes, well, you got some craft here that could be utilized. And that's what got me in. After that, it was my part-time job working in the office. So
like most people, encouraging words, it gave you the courage you needed. Pun intended in the use of encouraging, but it gave you what you needed to kind of go forward and do something, right?
Yeah.
Just like the topic we're going to talk about. In terms of young people needing that kind of encouragement, and you're going to offer some of that encouragement now, right?
Yeah. No, I was
that segue.
I was fortunate. Yeah, that was great. You've been doing this for a while. No, I was fortunate enough. I was fortunate enough to have someone that would look at me and say, "Hey, you've got a skill that you could build your career on this." So that was good. I've been lucky enough in my life to have that multiple times. So, but yeah, as it relates to the topic, I mean, with everything going on in this post-COVID world, I think, inherently as creatives or designers, we're problem solvers. And this point in time has the potential for it to be the biggest redesign, the biggest rethink of our design culture and how we approach things in the past 100 years. I mean, you look back at the things that have happened, and I guess I've looked back then and I've become angry at certain things. After when 9/11 happened, I was still in college. That was a fundamental shift in the travel industry and security. Those things were very big. And then a decade later, you have the recession. And that was, again, more earning years that seemed to be taken away from my age, my age group. And that affected only, architecture, construction, housing, mortgages. It was condensed. I mean, there was obviously residual effects in other businesses, but it was condensed to those are our biggest problems. This is every single industry. It's everybody across the board. From industrial designers, I still follow a lot of the design community out there on social media, And, you know, the industrial designers, within 2 weeks, I started seeing fashion designs for face masks. You started seeing social distancing for restaurants and, you know, different space planning options. I think that's going to trickle into urban design. You can't go anywhere without seeing someone walking their dog, jogging, biking, because outdoor activities have become the standard for being able to still get out and do things and not have to adhere to some of the PPE requirements and those things. So I think we're in a time that, as a young designer, really taking a look at certain industries to see, you know, how does technology play? How does everything play? I mean, there's such a toolbox that we can reach from in all of these things, that it really is an opportunistic time for any young designer getting into a number of industries.
You know, it doesn't really, it's funny because we have to act and we have to be creative about our solutions, and we have to address the things, the obstacles we see. And it's a matter of how soon, because we will eventually figure it out. Eventually, human nature will find the solution. It's just that if we were all looking creatively and using all the resources and seeing all opportunities, we would get there a hell of a lot faster. If people were using critical thinking and understanding that good data, it creates better solutions, and not just assuming things, and not just being patient about the gathering of information, making sure it's qualified before we actually use it and go forward and build something right now is imperative. You know, I see innovation everywhere, and like I have a column that's going to be coming out where it might be a little dated now, but I mean, it was basically about how I talked about how right now in marketing, branding is nothing to do with your logo anymore. It has nothing to do with your campaigns anymore. It has to do with how you're dealing with this virus. The manner in which you deal with the virus is now how you're going to be branded. When people see your business, and if you're not acting with empathy towards the customers, toward your staff, that's going to have an impact, whether you know it or not. Even, you know, if you walk into a McDonald's and nobody's wearing a mask and they're just handing you stuff and they're bumping into you when they walk by, you have an impression of the place. You go into another one and everybody's wearing masks, being, you know, distancing themselves. You're going to go, whether you believe it or not, it's going to be a positive, you know.
It's the perception of reality is far more real than reality itself sometimes.
Right. The perception is, and so it really doesn't matter what you believe. It's how it's going to be perceived. This is business.
And really though, I mean, I think that's been around for a while. I remember having discussions in architecture school, and we got into an entire discussion / debate about, you know, looking at business and looking at the design. And we were actually talking about a McDonald's, and you want to have a bunch of designers just go blah, talk about a fucking McDonald's and have them, you know, have to speak articulately. And what
am I gonna have to beep you now?
Probably. I'm sorry. But what it came to was, we were looking at different McDonald's and realizing that, you know, it was about the cleanliness of the bathrooms. You know, the restroom cleanliness was the biggest driving force as to getting those customers in. It was nothing about the food, which now you look at it and we have all of these precautionary measures. You have to have face coverings, you have to have gloves, you know, encouraging customers to do the same, social distancing. I mean, this really sets everything into a different kind of game, you know?
Yeah, and you being in architecture and in design and everything, one of the things, as a professional, I'm sure you're going to agree with me here, is that designing is one thing, but really, marketing is a big part of it. The pitch of your design is massive.
100%.
Sometimes it's 100%. Almost as important as the design, because if you don't have buy-in, you don't have anything. You know, there's nothing. The other side, it's sometimes you go so deep into what you're doing, and you present it to someone, they don't see the depth, and you just give it to them. They need to hear what the depth is, and they need to understand what it is, because some people just can't get there. And it's funny because when one of my earlier incarnations was I used to run or be a manager of retail stores, warehouse entertainment. I don't know if you remember the music store, rental store, warehouse entertainment. And I was an assistant manager, and I was pretty good. But they never gave me my own store, because they like to take me and send me into struggling stores to help clean that house and get it back up to speed, right? So I just kind of frustrated about that. I wasn't able to actually have my own store until later on. But I learned something because I was young. I learned something there that you needed buy-in from the staff, because when some young Yahoo comes in to new sheriff in town kind of thing, the hardest thing to do was to get them to buy in and start helping you. So what I ended up doing every single time, and it worked like a charm, is the very first thing I would do when I showed up to a store is I would go to the bathroom and I would clean it. It was so shiny.
It's good.
I would bring plants in because the most private room in the store for the staff is their bathroom. And a nice clean bathroom with a picture on it, and all of a sudden clean, that smells good. And the new guy came in and he cleaned our toilet. Maybe I'll listen to that guy.
Yeah.
Maybe that guy is trying to make So it was like the easiest and quickest way for me to get buy-in is to go and clean their bathroom.
Yeah.
No, that's all you really wanted.
Yeah. No,
I don't know. I don't know if that's relevant to what we're talking. You've said toilets, and it reminded me of that. But it did make me think about the buy-in on ideas, and I think that's an area that sometimes young designers, they have this kind of like really romantic view. I'm going to be a designer, and it's romantic, and then they actually do it. And there's a lot more to it that I think sometimes they get insighted.
I remember Bill always told these younger designers, like I said, this was a second year designer.
Yeah.
He would have quotes from people that he met in his life.
Sure.
And one of those quotes is, your design is both good and original. What's good is not original, and what's original is not good. And but I think that's important. I think there's a lot of mimicking of designs that have happened, throughout. And I obviously look to precedent myself when starting my design process. But I think now with where things are, and it's funny, I just started a book when all this happened called "The Future is Faster Than You Think." And that book really talks about, it's actually, I don't want to screw up the title here. I did bring it up for this, but it says, "The future is faster than you think, how converging technologies are transforming business, industries, and our lives." The first two chapters of this talked about robotics, artificial intelligence, being able to do exactly what all of us got thrust into, was jumping onto Zoom meetings. And it really kind of opened my eyes, I think, at the time, me reading this book and then looking at the world, just going, wow, this really is faster. I mean, whatever caused this, political views and whatever else aside, but whatever caused this to have everyone literally change their mentality, change their focus, change their day-to-day activity. This is unprecedented from what I've seen.
Right.
And people are doing it, and they made that flip very quickly. Right. And designers, designers need to take cue to that, to really look and say, whoa, okay, how is this going to affect the next 6 months? How's it going to affect the next 6 years?
But that's difficult, right? I mean, that's difficult to kind of turn your back on the way everything has been done for so long.
It is.
And then have to actually start thinking, oh man, I got to rebuild from this. Do I have the skills? I mean, do I have the flexibility?
Yeah.
To be able to take the skills.
We didn't have, well, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I would say there wasn't really a clear blueprint for this. Right. When all this happened, everyone just started putting up plexiglass, and all of a sudden it was sanitizer everywhere. And, is that, we've had to deal with it at our stores, is that really the experience that customers want? It solves our problems right now, but I don't know a lot of people that, my wife included, she has no desire to go to a restaurant because she doesn't want to deal with that experience. So the experiential part of what we're dealing with now, that I think is, how do you get those customers back? And going, previously to what we were talking about, how do you make them feel safe? How do you use that? How do you do that utilizing personal protective equipment or the actual design of the space?
Right.
How do those things start to work? Because even with a vaccine coming out, I think there has been a pivotal shift in the mentality of a lot of people. This has scared them to their core in a lot of cases. And as designers, we need to really kind of look at what we're doing. Being able to just cookie cut these buildings and do what I think a vast majority of designers, well, I'll use that term loosely out there, they haven't really paid attention to a lot of those things.
It's because I don't know what's happening in the casinos, right?
Yeah.
But as casinos, I know, are doing redesigns now.
Yes.
And preparing for when people come in. And I think they're putting separators like on craps tables and they're pulling machines apart so people aren't sitting close together.
Yep.
But what's interesting to me is the designs that they're currently working as individual companies internally that they're doing. I'm wondering, because once we start using them, some of those ideas will fade away, others will stay.
Yes.
And it's like we're starting from the beginning, because we don't have, we can't test this first. No. It has to just open up, and then people will make a choice on whether I want to sit in a cubicle and throw dice. What is the experience going to be like? What are they going to risk? How are they going to change? And then now you have other casinos that are going to have to also adapt based on what happens. And then eventually we're going to find a norm, right? Yeah. Because, aside from the branding, every casino looks the same inside, aside from just the slight, style of branding. Technically the same machines are in all the casinos. They're all piled in. They're all, here are the penny machines, and here are the, and then there's this section in the center, the pit in the middle. But what's going to change? And it's going to be it's going to evolution now, right? That we're going to start seeing.
Absolutely. I mean, and you look at that from,
it's exciting. That's actually kind of exciting in a lot of ways.
I think so. I really do. I mean, you look at it from, an architecture standpoint, just dealing with building code. Now we're talking about anything that's opening is only 50% occupied. That is a game changer for how long this continues, because anywhere I don't think I've gotten into Trader Joe's in 3 months because the line is out the door. And it's one of those things like, I would get a few things there. I'm not going to do it. And I think a lot of people are making decisions on what they're buying based on convenience. Prior to this, convenience was everything to this society. And I think people have been pushed out. There's obviously a convenience factor with Zoom. We don't have to travel anymore. We can, we've proven that in all of this. Yeah. But I'm very much wondering, how many people are going to stick, like, grandma down the street now orders groceries from Walmart and she's completely content. It took her a week to have her grandkids show her how to use the phone, but she can do it now.
Right.
So how does that change moving forward for us as designers? And obviously, like you said, there was no blueprint. We don't have the data analytics in order to analyze and see. So, a lot of this, I think, is going to come out of the creativity. And this is where your genius ideas come from, is when times are down and people are figuring out how to solve a problem.
Yeah.
So
yeah. The crisis is a mother of invention, right?
Yes, 100%.
And so you got a young kid who decided to be a designer before all this nonsense happened, and he's in his mind, everything's beautiful, and he's going to be able to change the world and perception with his designs. He's going to really make a huge impact. And a lot of times your designs, you have to think in terms of the experience people have with them, right? Because that's one of the things whenever I talk to young architects in situations, when I'm in situations where I have the opportunity to talk to young people and they tell me that they're interested in architecture, I always say, think of every important moment of your life and then consider the fact that your impression of it had a lot to do about where it happened. Mm-hmm. And that somebody built that place, that space. Somebody actually designed the space. This pivotal moment in your life happened. That's the personal relationship you have with. One second. That's a personal relationship that you have with that experience in that space. And I think that's kind of a big part of this entire thing that you need to consider sometimes with young people, is for them to really think of it in those terms.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. The funny thing is, I've had a couple of professors in my scholastic career, and I remember they always emphasized interstitial or outdoor space. And it was funny to have architectural professors say, okay, we're going to do an exercise here. I want you guys to sit and think about your most favorite space. It could be a week ago, 10 years ago, whatever, your most favorite.
Yeah.
I would venture to say probably 80% of the people picked a space that was outdoors. And it's funny coming from a bunch of architecture students because, mentally you're supposed to thinking of a space. And what they thought of was the interstitial spaces and those things as they started describing them. That to me seems very interesting, especially now where I'm seeing more and more activity. And I've joked around with my wife. I said, I've realized there's two types of people in this COVID, post-COVID era. She goes, who's that? I go, the people that are running outside and then the people that are drinking in their garage. Yeah. That seems to be the two that I see. But fact of the matter is people are still going outside. That is their release. That's getting them out there.
We certainly appreciate.
Yeah.
Appreciate things.
Yeah. I think so. But I think that's going to play into the future of design too, Right. More and more people are, in terms of the economics of all this, how many companies are we seeing now, just like yours? You're able to work remotely. You might have people come into your office, once, twice, 3 times a week. You might, after 6 months, say, you know what? Let's get rid of the office. Let's just get a space with a big conference room. Everybody works remotely. These are decisions that businesses are making. And as that happens in the commercial market, who knows what the commercial real estate's going to do. But I think more importantly, this has forced a lot of people, when they say stay at home, stay inside, a lot of people are looking around going, I need a better spot, and they're going to start to think more and more about how they can, turn their homes into their place of work. And, business Twitter is already doing that. They've basically said, hey, if you find working remotely, you're working remotely. So
I like how you're saying how young designers, when you said you asked them their favorite spaces and it was outdoors, I think that's a common thing, don't you think? I think a lot of architects feel that. It doesn't, it's not a matter of, that you need to make a building.
I think
architects I talk to act like that, feel like that too.
I think a lot of people feel like that, not just architects. I think that's just the nature of us. And when you tell us we're forced to stay inside, that gets us all claustrophobic. But
right.
I think that's the nature of a lot of people. Again, have the designers in the past 20 years. I mean, we have our outliers, but in terms of urban planning and those things, have they really taken heed to that? Mm-hmm. I don't know. I would venture in some cases say, maybe some of them, and others absolutely not. It brings up something interesting in, how does space, let's just use that as our example, in talking about indoors, outdoors, that gets into discussion of static and kinetic architecture, right? Is architecture able to move and adjust and adapt and pivot? Those are the things that I think are super interesting moving forward, because now we get into, okay, what if something happens? Now we've been given and have seen this blueprint of, wow, a pandemic can shut down global business, can shut down communities entirely. How can architecture help if that happens again in the future? How can designers look at these things and say, okay, how can we adapt our businesses, our hospitals, whatever it may be? How can we adapt those things to make sure we don't collapse with whatever that is? So I think that's an interesting point to build off of that sort of outdoor thing.
Do we have enough data to even start making those decisions?
I would think so. I watched here at Renown in Reno when all this happened. They hired construction crews and they turned the first floor of their parking garage into a visqueened off facility. And to me, there's more intelligent ways to solve that problem. I get it. We were all doing it on the fly. I don't know that anyone is going to agree that the answer to all of this is plexiglass and hand sanitizer, but it's what we're utilizing to solve the problem now. As we get more time to think these things through, those resolves to those problems are going to get a lot better. And I implore the young designers out there to really look at these things, because looking at technology and how technology is moving things forward, looking at the past and what we've dealt with with all of this, this is all going to be part of that same toolbox. This is all going to be part of what we pull from.
So now, I guess, in terms of like the practical use of a space now, of that you have to consider sometimes when you're designing. Now we have to start thinking about, I mean, life without the threat of a pandemic, but if there is one, there's a system in place to figure out how to work with it or deal with it. Like the government had a pandemic team that was there, and their job is to figure out what are the steps we're going to go through if there is a threat of this, so that we make sure that it doesn't go out of control. But now as individual organizations, we have to have our own little mini plan of how to approach these things.
I would say so. And I would say that's the job of the designer, to bring that to the table. That's where I think the good problem solving comes in. There's a number of businesses that kind of lucked out during all of this. They were already set up in a manner that allowed them to easily transition. A lot of other businesses like movie theaters were not. That's kind of the nature of the beast. Does this mean we're going to have a huge influx of drive-in movie theaters now that are just going to start coming on the books because that's where people are going to be safe? So it's very interesting to see this sort of flip-flop of things that died out in the past that became more mainstream, more pop culture. Are those things going to come back? Are a lot of things going to go away? So I think those are interesting questions to pose as a young designer to yourself when problem solving, because again, all of this is problem solving. And I think looking back at the end, we can get into a whole nother topic of the form follows function debate and those things. But I think at the end of the day, you have to look at yourself and say, did I solve the problem? Right. And that's the biggest thing. So, we did that a lot. That's been my past 5 years in terms of cannabis. Our cultivation facility needs to have redundancy in order to make sure that thing doesn't flatline. If it flatlines, that's a lot of lost revenue. Right. That's a lot of lost labor up to that point also. So we need to have redundancies in place and things where if a certain aspect shuts down, we have it covered. And I think thinking about all of these things, I mean, what happens if the governor issues guidance and we have to now, which he did today, we have to now look at a true 50% occupancy as it relates to my business, a true 50% only occupancy of what our original occupancy was allotted. That changes a lot of things, especially if your business isn't something where I can just make a simple, quick transaction, you're out the door. If you have someone dining and they're staying for long periods of time, how could your business have benefited if you had adaptability to be able to resolve this? And a lot of people did adapt. Curbside was very huge. Curbside pickup at restaurants and everything else, delivery, everyone adapted to those models. But moving forward, I think it's an interesting question to pose to yourself as a designer, what the possibilities are. Right.
And capacity also, it doesn't mean that your business has to be cut in half, even though it's half capacity. Correct. It means the flow changes and you figure out how the flow works. And I mean, if you're a restaurant owner, is there space outside of
and let's even take it to something like fashion or industrial design, in terms of the static kinetic conversation, could you design a necktie that also doubles as a face covering if you need to go in somewhere? Right. I mean, these are the types of things that I think people are going to start looking at. You're going to see a peak in these things.
I even had the little thought, I think it was yesterday. All right, what if we wanted to do concerts and people did drive-up concerts, like drive-in concerts with their cars, and they're watching a concert like we used to watch movies. Yeah. Well, then do you think they'll start coming up with cars that look like Pope mobiles, where you could stand up inside, with
custom design your own vehicle to show up? Yeah, absolutely.
campers that come behind that are just all, but I
Concerts
hate,
are going to turn into Burning Man. That's what it's
be
going to be.
massive. There's cars everywhere. It'll be like
and it could, that's the thing. It could be. That's the funny thing.
we have the open spaces in Nevada, right? We do huge open spaces to be able to turn things into.
We do.
Who knows? There'll be the design of a new drive-in stadium for concerts.
Yeah. So even take it out of the physical realm, right? Take it out of physical space. And like I was talking about earlier, these people that have made these decisions to say, you know what, no, I'm not going to restaurants. I don't like the experience anymore. I don't like anything about it. I don't want to wear a face covering. I don't want to get my temperature taken. I'm not doing it. The jump that has to virtual reality and being able to, instead of going on a class field trip, well, no, we're just going to watch this. This is a full 3D model that we can walk through and experience. But the only sense you're missing, I guess, if you are doing VR goggles, is smell. Those, and touch. But you can get yourself very close to having that experience. And I wonder how much of a split we're going to have where you're going to still see a good portion of society wanting to stick with that physical interaction, and the other ones that have said, you know what, it's not worth it to me. I don't need to interact with a bunch of people. I'm going to do this. So that's interesting too, as it relates to architecture. You're seeing it now with virtual tours for real estate. All different types of 360 shots that people are doing in physical space.
Right.
So, that's another aspect of all this, that it's very interesting, as much as technology has been thrust forward here in the past 20 years, that this happens at this time where technology seems to be, before seems like every 20 years. Now it's compressed. There's this hyper compression happening where things are changing so fast, so I think, again, in this toolbox, designers need to really look at that.
You're also talking about stuff that's probably controversial in terms of the industry, where people are kind of saying, that, although what you're saying makes sense in terms of people that are willing to make changes and willing to be progressive in the way that they look at the industry. There's a lot of people that are saying, give me a break. It's like, we're going to change everything. This thing is going to go away, or this thing isn't going to be that bad. In like a year, it'll be totally fine. And then you did all this work for nothing. So I think that there's more complexity to what you're talking about. Not in terms, I think you've done a good job in addressing it. But I think that the responses, the knee-jerk responses people have, are going to be obstacles that we look at going forward. It's always the problem, where people aren't willing to look past their nose sometimes at a situation and understand that adapting is part. It's going to happen whether they like it or not. Humans adapt.
I guess that's why I direct this toward the young designer and not the older designer.
The gray beards.
With my former employer, when I was 16, 17 years old when I started, I remember we got into a conversation because I was really into graphics. I thought, I thought I was good at it. I thought I knew a lot more than I did at the time, but I gave it that effort and I really enjoyed it. And he always said, yeah, graphics seem to be a younger man's game. And I said, well, why is that? He goes, because you have very quick gratification. Architecture is a very long process, and you don't have that instant gratification. That was 22 years ago. Things are a lot different now. You could design, model, and walk into a space with VR goggles almost like that. Things don't take as much time. I guess you can get into that debate on, the perception of what's real and what's not, but leaving that aside,
we could go on this topic. One thing that I can't help myself but bring up is, in what you just said, is that need for gratification, on your work. I mean, look at the Colosseum. I mean, the person who designed the Colosseum did not live long enough to see a brick laid.
Yeah.
But he still did the work.
Yeah.
How many people are willing to do the work required to build something beyond their existence. There's
Mm-hmm.
not a lot of people want to be there for the smashing of the bottle over the boat. They want to be there for the reward, for the awards and everything, for, hey, look, this amazing thing.
Yeah.
But there's something missing there. There's something missing about putting in the time and effort, not because of the rewards, but because it advances the industry, the art form,
Yeah.
because it is an art form at the end of the day. Commute spaces where we commute and where we talk and where we expend our time. Those are valuable things in humanity. I mean, everything great that's ever happened, and I said it in the thing, has happened in a space that was designed by somebody.
Yeah.
And unless it's out in the woods, and which a lot of great stuff happens out in the woods. Somebody made that too, right? It depends on who you talk to. But anyway, yeah. So I think that kind of stuff is really valuable. Anyway, so I think we're gonna be hitting our. Okay, go ahead. What you had a thought?
Yeah, no, I think that plays into this younger generation. I would really. I would want them, because obviously I heard that comment 20 years ago, and it was very valid. It held water at that point. Now things are different. We have a lot more at our disposal. Things are a lot easier for us to do and a lot quicker for us to do them in. With that being said, take these tools that we have in this toolbox and utilize all of them to their fullest potential. All of that that's exactly what we need to be doing. As a young designer, we need to be looking at everything that's happening, not forgetting the past, but looking at how fast things are moving forward. But before, it took how long to get a piece of information across the world? Now it's instantaneous. Right. Those things right there, we really, because we can't waste time. There's not more of it that's coming our way, and you're going to realize real quick that if you waste the time now, it's not coming back to you. So I think this right now is a very pivotal moment that young designers need to look at. And it's like we discussed earlier, who knows what's going to stick, but it's going to be those creative ideas that people go, wow, you know what? They reinvented this mousetrap, and that is going to stay,
right.
So
you reached out to me when you saw some of the videos, and you told me you asked me if we could talk, and because you wanted to have some things to say. Do you feel like you've expressed everything that you want?
Yeah, I think so. With a mild pause, but yeah, I think the momentum came back in round two.
In spite of my errors and my disruptions, you've been able to express everything you wanted to express.
Yeah. No, I think so. I think it was good back and forth for sure.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you asking me, because I think it was a really great talk. I already spoke to Craig Galati, an architect, about design and stuff like that. And I think you brought a whole new angle to it. I thought that was interesting. I liked that it was directed to young people and everything. So I really appreciate.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Aside from the fact that you took the time to watch some of these, I appreciate that. But also asking me, I think that's fantastic and everything. So anyway, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm so glad that you're doing this. I really do hope that a lot of young designers will start looking at things like this. There seems to be a lot more content coming out there that is available.
Right.
And I think if they start watching things like this, you're going to kind of get a little closer to that extra special glimpse into, what's happening in all different creative industries.
Well, the wonderful people at AIA Las Vegas, Randy and Kelly Levine, they've said that they're going to share some of these interviews with people, and that's the American Institute of Architects.
Oh, cool.
And I think that through that, they'll probably reach some young designers, hopefully, because I know a lot of people are in that organization.
Good.
If anybody's listening to this, and some young people that are interested in design, I think it'd be worth sharing with them too. I know it's being said at the end of this, which is, should be said at the beginning. I'll make sure that that's said in the beginning in some way, shape, or form when we go
Perfect.
forward. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it. Send our love to you and the family. Hope all is well.
Same to you guys. I still remember when he got his head shaved. Yeah, little handsome boy of yours getting his head shaved.
That video's, I know he's 10. He's going to be 11 in July.
Yeah.
But I think that video is still on YouTube. I shot that little 30-second one and put it on there.
That's pretty great. Yeah, every once in a while that pops up on my feed too, when I
Yeah.
do the St. Baldrick's stuff. Anyway,
Yeah.
that was great of you to do that. That was St. Baldrick's Childhood Cancer Research. You had your son get his head shaved in support of children fighting cancer. And I think that was one of our earliest times that we met. I think that was
Yes.
fantastic. And
Yes.
anyway, that's a great cause. All right, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Alex, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right.